everybody. I am joined here today by Veronica Conti in order to celebrate International Mother Language Day. Welcome, Veronica. How are you?
Thank you. I'm doing well today.
I suppose I'd like to ask you to tell us a little bit about your language story. So what languages did you speak growing up and why?
So I spoke mainly English, but also Spanish growing up because my mother, she immigrated to the US from El Salvador when she was 18. And she met my dad a couple years later. They got married and they had me. And so there was both languages in the household. But my mom was also practicing her English, trying to be American. And I mean, I was surrounded by English in America, so English became more the dominant language, but I spoke Spanish with my grandparents because that's the only language they spoke. But I didn't speak it to the level that I like to. I couldn't have like those deep conversations. It was more about like, I know all like about food and like about the weather. And I also learned Spanish in school, starting like when I was 11, 12, and all through high school and college. I spent a lot of time trying to make up for the language skills that I didn't feel like I had, and try to kind of get that part of my identity back, because that's part of growing up in the States also, like with a Latino background. It's like, who was I? Because I was like coming from a multicultural background, so I felt like the language was really something I could hold on to, and that could be part of my identity, and I felt like that I lost that a bit by not being able to speak quite fluently. So yeah, now I speak English still in Ireland, and then I also am speaking Spanish to my 22-month-old little toddler as best I can, and I also know some Romanian too now because I'm married to a Romanian man.
Oh, wow. So it turned out your household at the moment is multilingual. Tell me, what was it like growing up with English in America, but also having that identity, Hispanic identity? Like, when was there a specific time or moment that you realized that you had access to all that through Spanish, or was it something that you always had growing up? Or is it a particular time in your life that you really valued that all of a sudden? Or, what was that like growing up?
I think I always valued it. I always felt a little bit different. So it's weird. That's the thing. I never felt like I had a place. So I didn't quite fit in like with the American completely crowd, because people would be like, oh, well, you're Spanish, and like all these things, all these stereotypes about being Spanish. Completely incorrect. And then I also definitely didn't feel like I could fit quite into being Hispanic, especially because of the language, that I didn't have a full grasp of the language. So I did have an identity bit there, but there was never a point in time where I felt one or the other. I guess I always felt a little bit of both. It really helped growing up with my grandparents. So they were there throughout. They went back to El Salvador when I went back to college. So they were there throughout my life. So they really were kind of that anchor for me. And now obviously my mother always was there speaking Spanish. And I forgot to say earlier, my dad also spoke Spanish. Like he had to learn Spanish to marry my mom. And then he was a high school Spanish teacher. And like, he's still really good at Spanish, but they didn't teach it to us as much. They like used it as their special language sometimes if they wanted to say stuff like that we didn't quite understand. I think other parents must do that too. It's a thing.
I've heard it before, all right. And tell me, what would be a day-to-day like then? Because you're saying that you did speak Spanish with your mom sometimes, or?
Yeah. Well, she'd more speak Spanish to us, and like we might answer in English. It was like, I think she spoke more Spanish when I was younger, when I didn't quite remember it. Like my dad said that I used to speak more Spanish. And then like as she became just more and more comfortable, like as an American, it just became English. And then she'd like speak it sometimes I remember being in college and coming back, and we'd hang out with her friends. She didn't have any friends really that spoke Spanish, because we lived like with my grandparents in a largely English speaking neighborhood. And then when I was older, she had more Spanish speaking friends. Like the neighborhood we lived in was then a little bit more diverse. But by then I didn't know Spanish. So I guess that's a point in my life where I felt like when I got older, I felt more embarrassed. When I was younger, I just like wanted to speak to my grandparents. And then when I got older, I was like, oh, like she'd be speaking in Spanish and then I'd be like struggling and it'd be like funny. And it was really annoying. Like, I don't think they were thinking it was funny, but I just felt embarrassed that I couldn't quite speak back. And I think I told you I get flustered when I speak to Spanish to adults too. Like not in like when I speak to my son, it just comes out like super, I think it's great. It sounds so much better to me.
I was just wondering what then, because it sounds like you had access to Spanish, but perhaps the consistency. So it's kind of at times it had been stronger when you were a child, but then as you grew up and then English kind of got more into your household, I suppose, by just living. And I wonder, like, what do you now from an adult point of view, what do you wish had been different in relation to languages?
I wish that my mother and my father, both of them could have spoken Spanish to us more. And it also was difficult because I forgot to say, there's like also siblings in the mix where my Spanish is okay. And then as the siblings, I have 3 younger brothers, they spoke less and less Spanish. So I know that I got more Spanish when I was younger. Also, I forgot to say that my grandparents would take care of us a lot. Both sides, but so when I was younger, I would get more Spanish with my grandma that way. And then when I was in school, I would get Spanish like more formally. And I also spent time like abroad. Like I spent like a summer in Nicaragua just to immerse myself in the language. We also couldn't go back to El Salvador because it was too dangerous. So we lost that connection there. Like my mom brought me when I was 1 and she was just traumatized because the war wasn't quite over yet. And like just at some points there was a lot of blackouts and a lot of guns, and like some child soldier apparently was like pointing an M16 at me in the airport when I was like 1. And my mom just didn't go back for 18 years after that. So like, I think that's what like I'd like to give to my son, is that we could go back to Romania for his Romanian language and like keep that connection. Yeah, I forgot to say that's like part of it. Like my mom felt like she was really disconnected from like living in an area where there weren't many Latinos, and then also not being able to go back home. So we did start going back to El Salvador when my grandparents moved back there. But then by then it was like, it's too late. I was like 19, 20, so I was like set in my ways, and my brothers weren't as interested in learning Spanish as I was, so I didn't have that like where you have siblings that might be keeping it up between each other. I didn't have that as much either.
And tell me, now that you're a mom, and obviously you're telling me of the importance for you to pass it on to your child, and you're doing your best. It sounds like, you're speaking Spanish to your child, and then he's getting Romanian too, and English, obviously, by living in Ireland. I mean, I'm just wondering, what could you tell other parents who are currently either raising bilingual kids or thinking about it?
Well, I want to say that I actually didn't start from the beginning. We did start with Romanian because I felt like very confident, like that's my husband's native language. He can speak it very easily. But we only started when he was 8-9 months. And the impetus for that was we spent 2 months in Spain. And I was there and I was speaking Spanish, and I was like, listen, like, what if I was trying to speak it to him while we were there. And I was like, wait, I think I can just try to keep this up. And especially with COVID, it became a little bit easier because I was at home and I could really concentrate on it. And I guess I would tell parents that if you're in my situation and you're not 100% fluent in your language, but it's something that's important to you, even if you don't get it off like right away, because the very early months are tough. Like you're just, like you said earlier, you're just trying to keep this baby alive. It doesn't mean that you can't pick it up a bit later. When life's a little bit calmer, especially with Ireland, we're really lucky because if you do choose to take it, you can take a lot of maternity leave. Because I think with my mom also, she had to go back to work really soon. So there's not that chance to have that bond. So you have that advantage. And just as a child who wasn't able to, I had the opportunity there, but it obviously didn't quite materialize, is that it can be a huge gift that you give your child to have that. And I'm trying to pass that on to my son. I'm trying to like create that link that was lost. to my culture and my heritage, and like that'll serve you like everywhere. It's a global world.
Thank you, Veronica. Thank you so much for your time and for joining me today. That was great.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Soraya.